Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. And as you can see, I got my Prelude shirt on, so that means it's time to get back to work on Project Prelude. I know I've taken a couple weeks off it because of the Gambler and some other projects that have come up, but it's time to get going on it. I want to get this thing done this year. So we will be pulling the engine down from the loft and start trying to figure out how to route all the wiring harness for the wire tuck, and then where we're figuring out where we want to put our fuse block and things like that. We want to make sure we get all this stuff mocked up and fit before we get too far along in the body process. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Let's get to it. Alright, we got the truck backed up. Kind of a little bit of a pain in the butt. We had to move the Winnebago out of the way and shuffle a bunch of cars around the driveway. But now it's time to get the H23 out of the loft. Alright, so to get started with the harness aspect for the motor, we're going to take the engine harness, just kind of lay it out and see where everything lies. We're going to figure out what we can delete, like the idle air control valve, and anything else that we've deleted omission-wise, is like the EGR and things like that. So we'll just start out by laying the harness on here and seeing how it routes factory, and then deciding where we can make it look cleaner and make the wires disappear and make a nice clean look. Alright, so this thing is a moderately hacked up H23A1 harness that I'm going to be converting to this H23A. The motor, when I bought it, didn't come with a harness, and so this is what we have to make work. So I bought a VTEC solenoid plug or pigtail, so I got that. We'll have to wire that in. Not a big deal since we'll be pulling the whole harness apart, so it's just going to be a matter of routing it and figuring out which way is going to work the best. Okay, so last night when I was recording this, I was a little stupid. I forgot that this plug kit I came with two separate plugs, so I had to go locate it. There we go. We got the oil pressure switch for the VTEC solenoid and then the VTEC engagement plug. So we got all that stuff now. Up to speed. What we've been doing here is basically just going through the wire diagram and labeling every single plug, making sure that we have them all plugged into the right spot, because some of these plugs can plug into more than one location and we don't want to get them mixed up and then build a wiring harness based off of wrong wires going to the wrong plugs, vice versa. Since the map sensor on the 92 is located on the firewall and it's located on the throttle body on the Skunk 2 intake, I went ahead and stripped some of the wire out of the factory harness right here and just skinned it down, peeled off all the electrical tape, chopped it off. I went ahead and labeled those just so I knew what those cut wires were. We'll end up abandoning those at the ECU when we make the harness that goes into the ECU. So that's what I've been doing, just trying to get everything labeled and make sure it's in the right spot and that they got good clips and nothing's broken. Okay, with everything labeled, we got a little table set up here and we got the engine harness pulled off of the motor, and now we'll start taking off all the factory loom and breaking everything apart, and then we'll take each individual clip and plug it in where it goes, and then start making the harness off the motor, and we'll eventually make it all back up. And I believe I'm going to have all of it come right here to the center of the motor to go into the firewall. Alright, start breaking this stuff down. It's pretty straightforward. Just get yourself a razor blade and then just start halfway slice, and don't go too crazy because we don't want to cut into the wire itself. Just want to cut through all that nasty electrical tape so that we can get rid of this crappy plastic loom. and start making a nice clean looking wiring harness that goes where we want it to go. This stuff is kind of sticky and nasty and gross, but it's part of the process. This old tape is pretty gnarly. It seems like a pretty overwhelming, tedious process, but really you just got to make sure you have everything labeled well and just take it one wire, one plug at a time. And it's amazing how simple it actually is if you just look at it one piece at a time rather than looking at the whole harness. And this old, almost 30-year-old electrical tape is just basically turned to, all the adhesives turned to slime on it. It's just kind of nasty stuff. Alright, well I'll cut back here in a minute after I get all this stripped out. Alright, so we got all the loom stripped off, and what I'm going to start by doing right off the bat is just going ahead and weaving out all the things we're going to delete, such as the idle air control, the IAB, the EGR. I feel like there's a couple other ones I gotta remember, but we'll power steering, pressure switch, but we'll start by weaving all those out of there and just chopping them off at the end because we won't need them, so it'll just make our work area look a little cleaner and a little less scary, just because having all these wires here is a little intimidating. Okay, made a little bit of progress here. We've got the map sensor and some loom running over the TPS. Kind of got that nice heat shrink there. Got a little mount mounted there. And then figured out the VTEC wires and the oil pressure sending switch, the ground, and which one is the signal wire. This one's supposed to be a green and yellow. I did not have any green and yellow, so I had purple and white, so I made a note of that on the diagram over there, that's going to be a purple and white for the VTEC switch. And then these wires will make up in a loom, and I'll kind of just break them all off like that, and then they'll go into one large loom here, and then all these will come in and pick up in that loom just slightly over there, so we have enough room for the coolant hose to go through there. And then I also unscrewed the distributor wires here because they used to come down around the front, and then just looped them back over and ran them in between the VTEC solenoid and the distributor. It still has full range for advance, but now those clips, plugs are kind of hidden down here, so cleans everything up a little bit. And this is what we got for our wire loom. It's a expandable nylon loom, and then we've got tons of heat shrink. We've got 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, 1/4 inch, and that stuff I believe will shrink 3 times or 3 to 1, so that should be good for everything we need to do. And we've got this nylon sheath and or loom in 3/8, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, and 3/4 inch. So that should be everything we need to make a really nice looking harness for the engine bay. Okay, this is the first time I've ever used this nylon loom stuff. It's pretty nice. It's a lot easier to fish the wires through than just using heat shrink like I've always done in the past. But after you cut it, it really tends to want to fray and unravel. So once you got it cut, and you're trying to push wires through and get heat shrink over it to seal the edges, it pretty much just unravels and looks terrible. So what I've been doing is going over the side of my soldering iron, kind of opening it up just a little bit, and then just melting one side together, flip it over, melt the other side together, and then now you got a nice, still got a hole in there to pass the wire through, and it can't come unfrayed. And if you need to make it bigger and expand it, you can just pull on it and pop it open a little bit to make it a larger hole. But it doesn't unfray that way. Alright guys, it's another day working on the Prelude engine harness. Made some pretty good progress yesterday. Didn't get a whole lot of time to work on it, but got everything kind of figured out and sorted out on the passenger side, and then figured out the injectors. They are saturated, high impedance, so figured out what I need to do to get those wired in there. And basically what we'll do, but these are the injector clips right here, all labeled, and the red, every injector wire has a red and black wire going to it, and that's going to be the positive wire, and those run up here to the resistor box, which is located right about there on the driver's side inner fender area. And then the yellow, red, blue, brown, those guys are all the negatives, and they go back to the ECU, and the ECU triggers the injector based on completing the negative circuit. So to convert these from low impedance with the resistor here to high impedance, pretty straightforward. We're just going to go ahead and take all these red and blacks, and we will chop them off right here and pigtail them all together and solder them all together into this yellow and black line, which is a power line. So basically it will power all these wires without making it run through the resistor first. Alright, there is the upper half of the injector harness, all nice and clean. All the clips will run up through these holes in the intake. There, and there. That one's a little tight, so if you're doing it this way, just make sure your clip will fit before you run it that way. Worst case scenario, you'll just have to run it through this side. And then this end one just loops around. And they all come out here, and we'll gather them all together in the middle here, because I think I'm going to have the harness turn somewhere in this area and go into the firewall. So they'll all come together like that, and that'll be the next step. Probably bring the intake air temperature sensor just straight down and in, so it's kind of back out of the way. I'm not sure how I'm going to route it yet. We'll get all this bunched together and see what it looks like. Okay, for all these injector wires, I got them kind of grouped right here how I want it. So to keep them from moving while I get the rest of the loom on and get it all heat shrunk together, I'm just going to take a zip tie and zip tie it up a little bit higher than where I'm going to go. It kind of locks everything in place, and now these wires are stuck, they can't move, so I can move these around and the angles won't change and everything will be good. Okay, so these are the injector power wires, the red and black, that run over to the resistor box. Since I'm converting from low impedance to high impedance, we don't need the resistor box anymore, so we are going to just cut all these reds, splice them together, and then come off of it with this yellow and black, which will go to the ECU. And then we'll just solder that together and heat shrink it all up. Okay, so we got the wires twisted together. We're going to put a little dab of solder on the iron. Which, don't judge me, my soldering iron has been through many a harness, and it was just a cheapo, but it still works, so why replace it? Then we'll just rub it across the top, and once it actually starts melting on the top, it'll start drawing it into all the wires and locking everything in tight. Jump the heat shrink, slide it up the end, get it over the area, and apply a little heat. This heat shrink I got here is nice. It's got an adhesive in it that when it gets hot it activates, I guess, so that heat shrink is nice and sealed from any moisture, and then it can't slide off or move, even if it's just nice and sealed up good. Okay, so the NOx sensor and the O2 sensor both have shielded wires on them, and this shielding right here just basically goes to ground. This brown wire, one side goes off to the ground lug that goes to the water or the thermostat housing, and then the other side goes into the ECU chassis harness clip. So what I'm going to do is cut the shielding wire off so that I can get these things re-loomed, and then I will reattach it to a ground, and then reattach this brown wire to the ground also, brown and black, that will go into the ECU. Okay, so here's something interesting. I never knew, and all the times I've had a motor in and out of a Prelude, I always just saw this cover right there. I just assumed that was a not used plug to keep the wires from getting corroded or whatever. So I was wondering if I could just connect these yellow and blacks all together, because usually when wires are all the same color, they all go to the same spot, probably some sort of a power in this case. So I just decided to see what was under this clip. I popped it off, and if you look at the teeth or the pins in there, they're all connected. Not all of them. The top row and the right hand of the second row and the left hand of the second row and the bottom row are all connected together. So that tells me that all these yellow wires, yellow and black and yellow, can all come together to one wire, which makes sense. You have one yellow and black and one black and yellow going over into this clip that clips into the chassis. So now knowing that, that'll save me a little bit of time trying to chase those down and figure those out. I've been labeling them all just in case they went to a special pin location, but they don't. They all just tie together and pick up their power from here. So cool, that'll make things easier for me. Alright guys, got the main part of the engine harness all tucked and cleaned up and rewired. So we took the alternator wire, ran it around underneath the front. Once I get this timing cover and everything on, I'll figure out how I want to secure that exactly, keep that up out of the way. Took the distributor wires, flipped those over the top, and tucked them back behind the VTEC solenoid. And then got all my wires ran nice and tight. So that'll all be good there. And got the injector wires ran down through there, nice and clean. And everything comes out here into a pigtail that will be added onto and cleaned up once I figure out exactly where I want it to go through into the engine bay. So next step would be to get the motor sat inside the car so we can figure out exactly where we want everything to end at and go. I'm not 100% sure where I'm going to mount the coil yet. I'm thinking somewhere back into here. But again, that'll have to be once it's in the car, kind of figure out where everything's going to lay. I still do need to put the vehicle speed sensor wire, the starter wire, and the backup lights wire. But I'll make a separate tranny harness, and that'll just kind of tie into that one, and it'll all go back into the ECU or in the chassis harness. So that'll be a wrap for this one. Hopefully kind of showed you guys some tips maybe. I don't know, that it's not that hard to do. It just takes a lot of time, and it's a little scary at first, but if you take it one wire at a time, it really isn't that bad. So just jump in there and try it out.